People's Painter, How Ben Shahn Fought for Justice with Art by Cynthia Levinson, pictures by Evan Turk. The first thing I can remember, Ben said, I drew. From the time he could grab a pencil, Ben Shahn yearned to draw everything he saw in his village in Lithuania. His Mame Gittel's hands molding sturdy plates from slippery clay, his Tete Hessel carving stout chairs out of spruce trees, and his Tete Zede chiseling wooden skates so Ben could skim across the frozen Neris River. But paper was luxury in the shtetl, and there was none to spare. So with his finger, Ben traced the Hebrew letters that curled and curved through his book of Bible stories. Then he couldn't stop himself. He sketched in the margins. Some Bible stories, though, enraged Ben, especially when good people got hurt. That's not right. Ben also protested when his shedder teacher wasn't fair. After a classmate pulled a prank, the teacher kept everyone indoors, demanding the culprit's name. I'm not going to tell who did it, Ben declared, and I'm not going to pay for something I didn't do. Refusing to tattle, he walked out. Justice had mattered to Ben ever since he was little. He was only 4 when Tsar Nicholas II's soldiers hurled rocks through his window and dragged his father away. Just because Tete had been demanding fair pay for working people, he was banished to frigid, far-off Siberia. Ben didn't know yet how to draw his outrage, but feeling his father's boldness inside himself, he marched up to the sentry at the end of the street and shouted, "Down with the Tsar!" The soldier chased after him, but Ben escaped. Tete eventually escaped too, and in 1906, he made his way from Siberia to America. He wrote to Gittel, "Come." 8-year-old Ben, his brother Philip, his sister Hattie, and his Mema packed their belongings. But Zede could not leave the shtetl, the only home he knew. As the stagecoach pulled away, Ben had to let go of his grandfather's hand. He wailed. America bewildered the new immigrant. Trains overhead and underground, a cramped 2-room tenement apartment for the whole family, a chair that rocked and nearly dumped him over backwards, not at all like Tete's tomatoes. Ick. And in school, Ben stared at what seemed like thousands of letters in all different shapes and styles and sizes, all different from Hebrew. Even worse, bullies tormented him about his clothes and accent, and they called him names just because he was Jewish. Sometimes, though, they'd pause if he chalked their portraits on the sidewalk. No one drew people better than Ben. Seeing his craving to draw, a teacher gave him watercolors. Another paid him to pen calligraphy, elegantly curving letters, all in English. By the time he was 12, Ben was determined to become an artist. To do that, he'd need to finish high school, to go to college, learn about colors, lines, anatomy. But his father lost his job, and when Ben turned 14, his mother ordered him to leave school and go to work. He argued bitterly, send Philip instead, but his family needed whatever Ben could earn. So he apprenticed to a lithographer who hand-lettered signs for billboards and chiseled them into stone storefronts. By day, Ben carefully copied those thousands of English letters. He spent months on A, tracing and carving every curl and curve. Then he moved on to B. Gradually, he fell in love with these letters too. After 5 years, he mastered the craft, and his signs began to appear around the city. Meanwhile, at night, Ben went to art school, hoping to perfect his portraits. But there was a problem. Ben's teachers taught landscapes, purple shadowed valleys, misty haystacks, fields of cows. Ben argued that shadows are not purple, and he detested cows. I like stories and people, he explained. Stories about people fighting injustice, about workers like Tete, loved ones like Zede, and immigrants like himself. His teachers, though, insisted that paintings weren't supposed to tell stories, that pictures should be beautiful, not real life. Since he didn't want to portray pleasant pastures or cows, Ben wondered if he was an artist after all. Maybe he should only make signs. Nearly 30 years old now, confused and discouraged, he quit school, stopped painting, and sailed to Europe, then on to Africa. In museums, he gazed at centuries of pictures. This may be art, but is it my own art? He pondered. During that time, protests over an unfair trial in America also caught Ben's eye. 2 Italian-American men, Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vazzanetti, were executed in 1927 for a murder they probably did not commit. The judge and jury believed they must be guilty since they were poor immigrants and they opposed democracy. Here was something to paint, Ben later explained, infuriated at the injustice. If I'm to be a painter, I must show the world how it looks through my eyes, not theirs. What shall I paint? Stories. He returned home and told their tale in 23 pictures, even though his teachers had insisted that he must not tell stories. And people flocked to see them, even if they weren't pretty. Ben didn't stop there. He painted other stories about outsiders, working people, prisoners, and Jews who had been mistreated, just like Tete. His portraits were so powerful that in 1935, the United States government hired him. It was the Great Depression, and jobs were scarce. So was food. President Franklin D. Roosevelt wanted Americans to see that poor people needed a helping hand from Washington. For this job, instead of painting on canvas, Ben borrowed a camera. With his friend, Bernarda Bryson, whom he later married, he crisscrossed the countryside, taking photographs that revealed hard lives in troubled times. Young cotton pickers in Arkansas, impoverished families in Mississippi, manual laborers in Louisiana, child coal miners in Pennsylvania. Many people didn't know how desperate things were until they saw Ben's photo stories in schools, libraries, and magazines. They urged politicians to pass laws to make sure workers got jobs, families were fed, and children could go to school. The The government hired Ben again in 1937, this time to paint a mural in a new village named Jersey Homesteads. President Roosevelt's New Deal program had built the town so garment workers, most of them Jewish, could move from city tenements to the airy countryside. What story would Ben tell? His own. In 3 scenes, he showed immigrants, including Mema, arriving poor and bewildered in America, working hard, demanding fair pay, and finally settling happily in Jersey homesteads. To Ben, the village felt like a shtetl. He and Bernarda liked it so much, they moved there. Their children walked by the mural at school every day. While some parts of the government displayed Ben's works, others didn't trust him. In the 1940s and 50s, congressmen accused him of being disloyal because he didn't paint Purple Mountain's majesties or America the Beautiful. Instead, he shed light on Americans who lived in the shadows. One winter day, 2 men appeared at Ben's door and flashed their IDs, Federal Bureau of Investigation. They questioned him relentlessly. Why do you support workers, immigrants, civil rights? Isn't America fine the way it is? Which of your friends are enemies of America? Ben politely served them tea and cake, but he refused to tattle. So the FBI threatened to deport him to Lithuania, just as the Tsar had exiled Tet to Siberia. But Ben was not disloyal. I am the most American of all American painters, he later said. Eventually, the FBI backed down. Anyway, threats had never scared Ben. I hate injustice, he had declared. For the next 16 years, Ben continued to portray stories of people clamoring for their rights. Civil rights activists, workers demanding fair pay, political protesters, advocates for peace. Americans loved Ben's art so much, they called him the people's painter. Ben drew until the end of his life, handing down his stories of justice from generation to generation. When he was a Zayde himself, Ben encouraged young artists to sketch anywhere, especially in the margins.